Welcome to everybody joining us for our webinar today. My name is Geraldine Osman. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Staff Connect, and we're a mobile employee engagement software solution which specialises in facilitating powerful employee experiences across globally dispersed organisations. I'm delighted to be hosting this month's Staff Connect webinar with our guest speaker, Emma Bridger. Emma is founder and managing director of People Lab. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of her already. Emma's a long-term friend of Staff Connect, and she's one of the leading employee engagement experts and thought leaders that's working in the sector today. She's got over 20 years of experience working with organisations in many different sectors, and she goes in and defines and improves how they deliver a tangible and inspirational experience within their workplace. We've worked with Emma before. She's conducted many research projects which have brought greater insight into this topic. And she really pioneers the way that we're now able to link some of those insights to commercial benefits that are associated with an engaged workforce. So in this webinar, Emma's going to be sharing some of the latest insights and trends with you all, and as well as some practical and actionable advice for you to take away and help you to map and develop employee experience life cycles in your organisations. So I'm now going to hand over to Emma. She's going to be taking you through her presentation for around about 20 to 25 minutes, after which we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. You can submit questions through the webinar interface on your browser, and we'll read out those questions to Emma. Everybody that's on the webinar will get a recording of the webinar tomorrow. And the lucky winners of Emma's latest book will all be notified by September the 30th. Over to you, Emma.
Oh, thanks, Geraldine. Hello, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here today to talk to you about employee experience. And always great to work with the guys at Staff Connect. As Geraldine says, we've been friends for some time and worked together on a few things. So really delighted to be here today. So the webinar today is going to look into why employee experience is. I'm probably preaching to the converted on this webinar, but I'm just going to go through a little bit of background and share with you a couple of tools and just talk about kind of how this field is really starting to emerge and gain pace and getting more and more insights as the months and weeks and months go by. Okay, so I want to start, by addressing that first of all. So why is it that EX is so important? And it really goes right back to the first piece of research that was published in the Harvard Business Review right back in 1998. That for the first time empirically made the link between how people feel at work, engagement, and then customer kind of results, if you like. Since 1998, when that first piece of research was published, there's been an overwhelming body of evidence that says actually get it right with your people, everything else will follow. And I think it's really interesting that employee experience has really gained traction in the last few years, because what I'll sort of talk to people about is that employees have always had experiences, good, bad, or indeed ugly, and that we've known for a long time that the way people feel at work, so we talk about experience being very emotionally led. So when we have an experience, it's an experience because we feel something about it. And those emotions, those positive emotions, if you like, from a great experience, then lead to what we call engagement. And we know that the business case is very, very well documented and made for engagement leading to customer experience and customer engagement. So starting off with a kind of headline that, great experiences result in positive emotions, which then the outcome of that is that we have engagement, and we know that engagement helps to facilitate a brilliant customer experience and customer engagement. And there's an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that that's the case, but you only have to really think to your own life outside of work, and you can see this is true, that when you have a great experience with switched on employees of whatever company you're interacting with, that you have a better experience as a customer. So some more recent research specifically looking at experience and how that links to outcomes was published. This I've taken from a report that came out, was published by Deloitte. It's their Human and Global Capital Trends research they release every year. And this piece of research specifically was published by MIT. And it showed that a really great employee experience results in things like twice the innovation than an organisation, double the customer satisfaction. So employees having great experience absolutely impacts customer satisfaction. Higher profits between sort of 25% to 400%, and lower people turnover, half or more in terms of lowering the people turnover. So the business case is emerging. As I said, if you're interested in this specific piece of research here, it's from Deloitte's Human Global Capital Trends, which they release every year, and this was published by MIT. So as I said, you get it right with your people, and all the rest will follow. How do you do that? I'm going to kind of share a couple of nuggets with you. But before I do that, what I'd like to do is just kind of do a little bit of scene setting. There's a lot of talk at the moment about the way the workplace is changing, and the change is kind of becoming exponential. I think it's happening so quickly and so rapidly at the moment, and we're seeing this increase in diversity, huge increase in remote working. So the kind of traditional model of people at a workplace is really being disrupted. We know that gig jobs are here to stay, that there's a lot more matrix working, so the traditional kind of hierarchical org charts are not as dominant as they once were. We know digital is playing a huge role in the way workplace is changing, and not least our expectations as consumers outside of work is sometimes not being matched by our experience inside of work. But we know that the mobile technology, which is kind of, again, changing day by day, is really starting to blur that kind of work-life, the work-life, not necessarily balance, but the separation between our home lives and our working lives. So there's some kind of stuff happening in the environment which is really changing the way that we experience work. And this can be a real force, a positive, actually. Some really exciting changes happening. And in terms of the psychology, so some of you might know, if you've heard of me or come across my stuff, my background is psychology and positive psychology, and I'm really fascinated by the way psychology is helping to us understand the way that employee expectations are really shifting, again, from a really traditional model of I come to work 9 to 5, I get my paycheck, as long as I'm satisfied, that's okay. And we're seeing a kind of a much higher expectation for people, both at work and coming into work. So people now, it's not enough just to have a pay at the end of the week. We want a purpose. We want to feel there's a point to what we're doing. Money is not enough anymore. And it's not enough to be satisfied. I want to be developing. I want to be progressing. I want to be, moving forwards. And years ago we'd have a boss, they might tell us what to do, and now I want a coach, or someone to ask me brilliant questions, someone to help me be the best that I can be. And annual reviews, we've done quite a lot of work with organisations over the past couple of years around this. So moving from a kind of traditional annual review model to how do we help managers and teams to have ongoing conversations about their performance at work and how it feels to work somewhere. As a psychologist and a positive psychologist at that, I've seen a lot of kind of movement from talking about weaknesses in the workplace. What am I no good at? What can't I do? What do I need to get better at? To saying, actually, let's talk about strengths, because far better place to get the most out of people if we play to people's strengths and get them to do even more of what they're good at, rather than trying to sort of upskill them in an area which the best one in the world might not ever be an area of strength for them. And my job to my life. So as I said before, that there's a real blurring of kind of work and home, if you like, and job is no longer sort of compartmentalized part of our life. It's sort of spreading out across every aspect of our life. So these employee expectations are shifting, which is really having a big impact on how we experience work. Pretty much every company I work with, speak to, will talk about how do we A, stop people leaving who've got a problem with attrition, and B, how do we attract the best people? And again, there's some fairly interesting stats out there which show that people are actively looking for new job openings, and people are thinking about changing jobs and possibly leaving the organisation long before you have any clue about that. And I think this is really interesting. The third bullet there, 91% of people left their employer the last time they switched jobs. Well, there's a huge opportunity there to say, actually, you know what, we've got some good people. Let's try and keep them. Let's see how we can, make this a place where they want to stay and want to do their best work. And only 27% of people believe in their organisational values. So there's a real disconnect here. And again, the real opportunity to improve experience, keep good people, attract the best people, and all of that, as I said at the beginning, will have a direct impact on your customers and how your customers feel. So a little bit of kind of context and scene setting there. It's interesting in this sort of real growth in interest in employee experience. And again, this is from the Deloitte's 2019 Human Capital Trends report, and their research showed that EX is absolutely on the agenda. So 84% of HR and business leaders say it's important, very important. And in contrast to that, only 9% say they're ready to address this. And we're running some research at the moment, which I would love to invite all of you guys to get involved with, and more information on that coming soon. But our initial kind of research and insights have shown that the business case is made, the research is there. It's a no-brainer. Employee experience is important, but lots of people don't really know where to start, because this is so much bigger than HR can kind of tackle alone. So it's kind of a whole new way of working, really, which I think is very exciting. So thinking about what we mean by employee experience, there isn't a single universal definition, and I talk about that a lot with engagement as well. There are some great commentators out there who've got a view. So I've got Jacob Morgan here, who's written a fantastic book called The Employee Experience Advantage, which is well worth a read. CIPD obviously have got some views on that, and Josh Basin, who works with a lot of the big management consulting firms, and very well known writer, have got some views on this. But really, my take is it's up to you in your organisation to think about, figure out, and work with your kind of key stakeholders. Say, well, what do we mean by an employee experience? And there's the definitions I put up here are all quite different, actually. You've got Josh talking about a kind of a life cycle view, Jacob taking much more of a kind of holistic sort of strategic view, and CIPD much more looking at kind of the environment. So three really quite differing views here of what EX is, and there isn't a right answer to this. It's up for grabs, really. So great opportunity to figure out what it could and what it should mean for you. So just in summary of that first piece of sort of scene setting, as I said, engagement requires much more than what HR can do alone. So we're looking at things like technology, which is where we get into the world of sort of the Staff Connect app. So how can tech help us to really improve and create a great experience for our people? And I think apps like Staff Connect are great at connecting people and giving people a voice that perhaps not had much of a voice before. I think it's important also to say that experience is not the same as engagement. And I've done quite a bit of blogging on this and talking on this, and for me it's very simple and straightforward. If we get the experience right, it will facilitate engagement. So it's not like this is anything new. We've always worked on experiences, but we may not have called it this in the past. So when companies previously have said we need to improve engagement, they've said, well, what can we do to improve engagement? So that was really looking at the experience, but perhaps not in as holistic a way as we would do it these days with this new discipline emerging. So we know experience is crucial for engagement, and I think what I'm really kind of loving about this increased focus on EX is a lot of the learning has been taken from a customer experience and user experience disciplines, and in those fields, it's all about the end user. So user experience, who is it that's using our products, and how are they interacting with our products and how they experience it with it. Customer, it's all about, customer, obviously, the clues in the title. So I think the reason that EX is really turning things on its head is that it's genuinely employee centric. You need to know your people. You have to start by thinking about your employees and how things feel for them. And I think for many years, we probably all be guilty of kind of sitting in an ivory tower and coming up with what we might have thought was a good policy, a good procedure, a good way of doing things without thinking about the end user, in this case, the employee. So this is a kind of really exciting change, I think, in emphasis of designing these experiences. It's subjective, so you have to kind of be a bit of a psychologist. It's not a rational thing. This involves emotions. So we have to look at kind of the psychology of experience. So our attitudes, our beliefs, our perceptions, our behaviours, and the way we experience something. If, when we're designing experiences for people, with the best will in the world, we can kind of have a view on how we think it might manifest, but in real life, it could be quite different. I often tell a story about an office move that I got involved with a number of years ago, actually, when I was still in house, and it was, moving a bunch of people from some not particularly nice offices, porta cabins on car parks, to some really fancy, lovely new offices in Cardiff for a utility firm, and we were getting rid. One of the things we're doing as part of the office move, kind of trying to be more green, getting rid of things like people's own personal bin under their desk and moving to the cycle bins at the end, or the kitchen. And with everything that was going on, that was the thing that invoked the biggest reaction from people. People had a very emotional response to losing their bins. And it kind of it all got a bit out of hand, or the unions got involved. You're sort of thinking, this is crazy, this is over bins, but none of us kind of planned for that. None of us knew it would have that kind of reaction from people, but it did. So it's always worth thinking about, what is the emotional reaction going to be? How are people going to feel about these experiences we're designing and creating? And as I said, there's no single definition. There's no one size fits all approach. I'm very, very keen on the idea that you can't kind of take a model off the shelf for this and go, right, we'll just do that and that will work. You've got to find out about what's going to work for your own people, your own culture, your own organisation, which I think, again, is a great opportunity. So I think it's a really exciting approach to this kind of emerging discipline. So in terms of what you can do then, kind of go back to some of the learnings from customer experience. We know that brands orchestrate memorable moments for their customers, and experience has been around a long time in the world of customers and users, if you like. And again, Gartner, well worth looking at some of their information that's out there, but they say that 90% of companies compete primarily on the basis of customer experience. So with that in mind, again, if we get it right with our people, that gives us a competitive advantage, because great experiences mean high engagement, mean great customer experience. So we're living in an experience world. So in some ways, we're kind of a bit behind the curve when it comes to sort of inside the organisation. This has been happening everywhere for some time, and we need to kind of get, catch up, if you like, and really learn from my colleagues in CX and UX. So Gallup argue employees have become the consumers of the workplace, and whether or not you agree with this, I put this in there because I think it just shows that mindset shift to, companies sort of viewing employees as like we're doing them a favour, by giving them a job. We have the position of power to actually, we know we've got to really view our employees in quite a different way as consumers or otherwise, because and begin with them at the heart of the design process, because the world's really changed for all those reasons that I talked about up front. So I think it's really worth keeping this in mind when you're starting to go down the route of designing, an experience for your people. A little bit of psychology here, and I wanted to put this in because it's very tempting when you look at experience to look at people like Google and Facebook and all the people that are held up as being really good at this. And I'm not in any way kind of putting down what they do, because they do some great stuff. And it's really easy to look at the kind of the hygiene factors. And, the first thing that people often do is they sort of say, well, we'll look at benefits, and we'll let's have a gym on site, or do some childcare vouchers, or have great coffee, or where we can do free lunch on a Friday. And all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at that sort of stuff, but that is not the stuff that really creates an amazing experience for people. That's not the stuff that generates that positive emotion. So this model is kind of half taken from sort of Hertzberg hygiene motivation factors, and half taken from the kind of the iceberg model of culture. And what we're saying is that the stuff that really motivates people, the stuff that really creates that kind of great experience, is the stuff that's often under the surface that you can't touch and feel as easy. So it's about the kind of stuff that really creates engagement. So I feel recognised, I'm doing challenging, stimulating work, I've got some responsibility, I'm able to grow and develop. So those are the kinds of things that really make the difference. I think that understandably companies, people tend to go straight for the hygiene stuff because it's easy, we can see it, we can touch it, we can, you know, tick a box if you like, but actually it's the stuff that's sort of below the waterline that is really going to make a difference when it comes to an experience. So I want to share that with you. So thinking about, you know, how do we go about this? I think a great place to start is really by understanding what moments matter to your people. And you've probably seen the kind of classic employee life cycle model. And we've taken that and kind of moved on a little bit. And this is very deliberately not a life cycle, because the kind of life cycle is cyclical, and it has almost like a kind of a beginning and an end. And your experience at work is more of a spiral, it's an ongoing thing. And even within one organization, you might have like 3 or 4 different jobs in your lifetime of that organization or more. So you might kind of go back to the beginning of this spiral a few times in one organization. So it's kind of got the classic elements of a life cycle you'd expect to see, so attraction, hiring, developing, etc. But what we wanted to do was really think about this from the point of view of the employee. So going back to that kind of design thinking methodology, putting people at the heart of this, thinking about, you know, what sorts of decisions and milestones do people have when they're at these different points. So, you know, I'm thinking about looking for a new job, or I've got the job, great, or I want to get on in this company. So really it's about kind of putting yourself in your employee's shoes to map against those kind of classic HR milestones, if you like. And just on the next slide, I've just kind of put leadership and culture that go across all of this. So we can't forget the role that culture plays in all of this. So is the culture set up to help people have great experiences? Is it going to help or hinder them? And leaders, so if all else is equal, we all know that leaders have a vital role to play in how we experience our work day to day. So you only have to think about a time you work for a great boss, or perhaps a boss that wasn't so great, that you could be working for a brilliant company, have a great experience, but if your manager, if for whatever reason you're not getting on with your manager, all of that kind of pales into insignificance. So we have to think about the role that both culture and leaders play in developing a great experience. So just a couple of top tips here. So I mean, we run you know, full day courses on this, so I just want to pull out a few things that I thought might be useful. So one really quick and easy way that you can start to really get into the mindset of your people is to use personas. And I've been using personas for probably about, I don't know, a long time, 15 years or so now, to understand my audience, both when I was in-house and since running People Lab. And personas is something that we very much took from the world of user experience, user design and website design, to sort of say, well, here are the people that we're working with, we're communicating with, we're designing experiences for, and they're fictional characters that you use to create, you create using research to represent your audience, in our case, employees. So, you know, you might say, well, that's not ideal because you can only, realistically, you can only work with sort of 6 or so personas before it gets onerous, but it's better than not thinking about your people at all. So they help us to understand employee needs, experiences, behaviour, goals, and using them can really help us to see things from the perspective of an employee. And I think there are some really exciting developments, you know, with products such as Spotify, for example, where they are absolutely going down the route of hyper personalization, which is they kind of know you as an individual. And I think at some point we'll see those kind of technologies come into the workplace, and we'll be able to use that same kind of personalization in the workplace, which will just be amazing when it happens. But until then, I think personas is a good halfway house. So if you haven't ever used them, highly recommend it. Send out some information if it's of interest on how to develop personas, or just Google it, and there's lots of information out there. It's not rocket science. So highly recommend thinking about using personas. And the other top tip I wanted to share with you was creating a strategic narrative. So we've talked about purpose and how employees at work, it's no longer enough just to have a paycheck, they want a purpose. And strategic narrative is a clear, compelling story about where the organisation is going and why. And again, from an experience point of view, we know it really helps to share stories about, you know, the strategic narrative, the purpose of the organisation, and you know, help people to understand it, to connect to it, and figure out the contribution that they can make. And again, with the sort of rise in mobile technologies, we're able to sort of reach out to employees in, you know, across the organisation in a way we've not been able to before, to make sure that they have an understanding of their strategic narrative and they're able to get involved with it, to connect to it, to figure out the contribution they make. So that's another top tip that I have there. So I wanted just to include this slide from Jacob Morgan. So as I said, he's written a great book called The Employee Experience Advantage, and this is his model. So this is the model that he uses. He talks about the different environments that we operate in that help to create an overall experience. And I thought it was worth putting this in here because it's just helpful to think about, what do we do from a culture perspective? So how does it feel for our people? What's that emotional reaction they have? What do we do from a physical environment? So, you know, as I said before, the kind of something as simple as taking people's bins away can cause a furore, but actually it's like the right thing to do. And then technology. So we're seeing, you know, real rapid rise in the technology that we can use to help people to have a better experience with the organisation. So he sort of talks about technology as the tools employees use to get their jobs done. And we know that, you know, for a long time internally has lagged behind massively what we experience from an external point of view when it comes to technology, and I think that's just started to change, which is really exciting. So again, you know, the use of things like mobile apps, actually moving to the next slide, different sorts of tech can really help us when it comes to improving the experience of our people. So apps, obviously things like Staff Connect, there's lots of great apps out there that, you know, give us opportunities we've not had before. Chatbots, so we're seeing more and more companies use chatbots to help people solve problems. IBM, as you would expect, are really leading the way when it comes to using tech to improve their experience. I was at a conference recently where someone from IBM was talking about how they use their Watson technology to really, you know, kind of really made big changes to how they develop the experience of their people. So they're using things like chatbots. AI and big data. So you may or may not have heard, you know, stories about, you know, Google have an algorithm to predict who's at risk of leaving. So we're able to use kind of big data now and AI in a way that really helps us to make better decisions. So it's not replacing, it's helping us to work with other parts of the organisation to understand what's really going on, to use metrics to say, well, you know, where are people at risk of leaving? How can we use this amazing technology to improve the experience? And then we've got virtual reality and augmented reality. Quick story there, Ministry of Justice are now using virtual reality to help recruit prison officers, because it's, you know, going into the environment of a prison is a very sort of you know, specific place to work, and it's quite hard to experience that before you're actually in there because of all the sort of security checks, etc. So using VR to sort of say, this is how it's going to feel, what do you think? Is that somewhere you think you could work? And it's really helping to improve their retention. And then 5G, so, you know, we all know that 5G is going to make a huge difference to the way we experience all sorts of stuff at work. And I think it's really going to help narrow the gap between how we experience tech in work and outside of work. So some really interesting developments on the horizon, and loads of opportunity to use tech to genuinely improve how it feels for people at work. So you have a choice. So lots of exciting things happening, and some things I've talked about may think, well, we're miles away from that. You know, we've got years to go before we get there. But I think that, you know, we have a choice in that we can really start to think explicitly about how we can design better experiences for our people. It doesn't have to be a miserable experience being at work. And I think for me, the choice really starts with saying, we're going to begin with the end user in mind. We're going to start by thinking about how this feels for our people rather than how it needs to feel for us. So I think that's the kind of the key message, I guess. So with that, I would love to ask if you've got any questions. And whilst you're having a think about that, there's a couple of things I just wanted to give a quick plug to. So if you're interested in learning more about employee experience, we're running an EX design workshop on the 12th of November, and really happy to give a 20% discount to Staff Connect friends and family listeners to this webinar. So we'll get a code out to you if you're interested, so it's running on the 12th of November in London. It'll be the second one we've done. We did one earlier this year and had a really great response, and it seems to be an area that people are sort of saying we need help with this, and it's a very, very practical, tool-led, activity-led day rather than a sort of classroom-based talk to and listen sort of day. And the other thing I mentioned right back at the beginning is we are about to roll out some research on EX, and would love to get as many people involved as possible. So again, I'll put the call out there on that, and if you'd like to get involved, would absolutely love to hear from you. So Geraldine, have we got any questions in?
Yes, I can see a couple of questions coming online, people have posted, so let me just pick a couple out for you, Emma. So I've got one here saying, referring to where you were talking about companies delivering a better employee experience, and asking whether you can think of any companies that you've worked with where they've seen better employee retention from some of the initiatives they've done around employee experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the key areas that you see improvements in, you know, I'll say straight away, but quite quickly. I give you lots of clients. Obviously, I have to be careful not to name people because a lot of this stuff's confidential. But I'll kind of talk more generically. I mean, there was one organisation we worked with that had a number of call centres around the UK, and what they were finding, they had really, really high attrition. It was running over 50%, which, you know, you put a price on that, and I think depending on what you read, there, you know, kind of numbers put against every time someone walks out of your door between sort of about 8k and 30k. So over 50% attrition, you know, you can see how very quickly that's quite an eye-watering number in terms of cost of the company. And when we did some digging, we found that going back to that kind of model, that kind of iceberg model I showed, you know, initially people sort of go, well, I'm so unhappy here. I'm not engaged. I'm not having a great experience. I'm not treated well. But I'm prepared to sort of walk down the road to the next call centre. There's lots of them around for something as small as like a nicer mobile phone, or, you know, a small uplift in salary. And we did some work to improve their experience. So with that particular organisation, there was a lot of work that was done around giving employees a voice. So really changing the way that employees within the call centres were treated, their whole experience, so they felt they were part of something, they felt they had that purpose, they were part of something, rather than just a number that came in every day to answer calls. So a whole programme of work to really give them a voice, to get them involved, to let them have their say. And very quickly, within about 3 months, actually, we started to see that attrition coming right down. And suddenly, you know, that kind of temptation of like better phone or a bit more money down the road, it's like, no, actually, I'm happy here. I'm going to stay here. You know, things are really improving. And over the course of a year, we saw it go down from, I think it's about 56% to about 21% in the course of a year. So you can really see, I mean, that was a huge number, and that was probably one of the biggest ones we've done in terms of it being, you know, in a really bad place to in a much better place. So, but lots and lots of experience over the years of really, you know, halting that kind of attrition rate with employees by thinking about them, understanding what their issues and concerns are, and designing experiences to help them feel like, you know, work can be a good experience for them.
Yeah, and that certainly reflects what we see with a lot of our customers, you know, just the giving employees a voice, connecting them to a purpose is so important. And we work in sectors with incredibly high churn, like retail and hospitality. I mean, some aspects of those sectors have 100% churn, and, you know, that's replacing your entire workforce every year, which is, you know, just horrifically expensive. Another question I've got here for you, Emma, is just referencing that one of the stats you mentioned was 9% of companies, only 9% of companies are ready to address the employee experience. And what do you think the main barriers are that are preventing people from addressing it? Is it just, it seems like it's too big, it just needs breaking down, or you know, what do you think those barriers are that people recognize the importance, and yet there's not many of them are saying that they're you know, on the front foot and tackling it head on?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, Geraldine. So we were talking to companies at the moment, actually, as part of this research about, you know, what's stopping you. And there absolutely is this realization that we need to be doing this because the best companies are doing this and they're winning the war for talent. But equally, we hear time and again, people saying to us, this feels massive. The people agenda was big before, and now it's even bigger because we're saying actually it's not just about the kind of traditional HR stuff and internal comms stuff, it's also things like the environment, it's also things like technology, and it just feels really huge and we just don't know where to start. So I think that's part of it, and this is why I think design thinking is so helpful, because it's about taking small bite-sized chunks. So we talk to companies about looking at those moments that matter on their kind of employee life spiral and saying which are the biggest moments for your people, which are the ones that really matter the most. Let's start with those, and let's look at how far you are from your ideal experience, and let's use some design thinking methodology. So let's think about how we very quickly look at minimal viable products, and we test and learn. We're not trying to solve this all and have this perfectly crafted, amazingly wonderful experience from day one. We're saying let's pick it off in bite-sized chunks and do it that way. And it feels more manageable for people, I think when you sort of look at it that way. And I think it is a very different way of working. So our kind of colleagues in customer experience and user experience have been used to working in a much more collegial way, or like a coalition where they're matrix work and they're pulling in from lots of different disciplines. They'll be speaking to psychologists, they'll be speaking to analytics people, they'll be speaking to the tech side, they'll be looking at all these different sort of facets that go towards creating a good experience. But that's a very new way of working for people sat in more traditional kind of HR or people facing roles. So the idea that you need to sort of pull in lots of different people to help make this happen, I think again is sort of takes a bit of a mindset shift, and again it's about sort of realizing the sum is greater than the whole. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Sorry, I got there in the end. And I think traditionally people get a little bit nervous. Am I going to be able to control this? And it's just a very different way of working, and we've seen the benefits are there, but I think it just take a while for people to sort of really figure out what that means for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's almost like companies need to adopt almost like a service design approach now, isn't it, to sort of extend it across all the touch points in the employee experience.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, just one more question then, and then we'll wrap up on this. So so I think one of the interesting elements is global workforces, frontline, desk line employees, all sorts of different roles, different different regions, different functions in organizations. How do you unify the employee experience across everybody in the organization, so that not just the experience, but what they experience is a unified culture? What do you think the best tools for doing that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is really helping us to do that. So keep going back to things like our apps and like Staff Connect. In a way that before we weren't able to kind of reach certain people around an organisation, now we can. Technology has enabled us to do that. And I think for me, it's about having some kind of global principles when it comes to the organisation, but allowing for some flex in terms of sort of local implementation. So what works for one team in one area may not work for another team in another area. So you've got your signature processes, your signature experiences, that you're proud of, from a kind of a moments that matter life spiral point of view. So you've got a kind of a signature onboarding, but it might be slightly different depending on what your role is. So certain roles might demand quite a different experience to another role, but at the heart of it, the kind of the sort of DNA of the company and the culture should be in there, and it should be recognizable as kind of belonging to that organization, that brand. But the way it's kind of implemented, I think there needs to be a little bit of space given to allow people to sort of flex it to suit them. So it's not a kind of an off-the-shelf, if you follow these 10 steps, you'll have a great experience. It's about saying, we've got some global principles, we've got some signature processes we're really proud of, we've designed them in a very specific way, but how that manifests more locally is up for grabs. And I think we've seen that approach work really well with engagement. And in designing that, we've had to design great experiences for people to engage them. So I think that's the way that I would approach that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, technology facilitates, and you know, we're really proud of our technology at Staff Connect, but we always partner it with, you know, with strategy, you know, around content, around, you know, around the culture of companies, and we do that through the customer success program, so that you know, we can really start to make technology work for the individual customers that we work with. It does need a strategic element to combine it and bring it all together.
Absolutely,
Okay, so I think that's all I've got on the questions feed. So I'm gonna wrap up. I start that by saying thank you to you, Emma. There was some really great content in there. You know, personally, I really enjoy seeing your insights, and you know, every time we talk and look at your work, it's, you know, it's taking shifts into new areas that are just so interesting, which you know, I hope the audience have enjoyed as well. Quick reminder, if you visit staffconnectapp.com, we've got a wealth of resources on this subject, from videos and blogs and case studies to audiobooks and ebooks. So feel free to visit our resources section on the website, follow us on social channels to get notifications about new content that we have and next webinars. And so on behalf of the Staff Connect team, thank you all for joining, and I wish you a very good rest of your day or evening.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.